Lenny Kravitz grew up in a New York home that mirrored the broader cultural shifts of America in the 1960s and 1970s. His father, Cy Kravitz, was Jewish, born to Russian Jewish immigrants, and worked as a television producer, a profession that gave him a foothold in the entertainment industry, albeit from behind the camera. On the other hand, Kravitz's mother, Roxy Roker, came from an African-American lineage in which the pursuit of art was often both a dream and a necessity. She was an actress whose fame soared with her portrayal of Helen Willis on the hit television series The Jeffersons. This interracial and interfaith family dynamic profoundly influenced Lenny from the start. His Jewish background connected him to traditions ranging from the celebration of religious holidays to the stories of perseverance and triumph deeply embedded in Jewish history. Simultaneously, his African-American heritage introduced him to another rich cultural tapestry that spanned from the unique flavors of Southern cooking to the robust rhythms of gospel music. Kravitz's mother, known for her kindness and generosity, brought a gentle energy into the household. She was the type of person, according to him, who would never gossip, never speak ill of people behind their backs, and always seemed to prioritize empathy over judgment. In Lenny's words, she put others first. She was incredibly kind and very fair. In contrast, his father represented a more disciplined and occasionally intimidating presence. Though he cared for his son, he exercised a form of tough love that often left young Lenny feeling both loved and anxious. Cy Kravitz was not an unkind man, but he believed that discipline and structure were essential. Perhaps he wanted to ensure that his son remained grounded in a world that could easily lead astray anyone privileged enough to have a famous mother. While it might seem that coming from an entertainment family would open countless doors, the reality was that these dynamics were complex and sometimes suffocating. Further shaping his youth were the neighborhoods in which Lenny spent his time. Between the hustle and bustle of Manhattan and the harder-edged atmosphere of Brooklyn, he experienced two extremes daily. On one end, there was the glamour of the Upper East Side, where people enjoyed fine dining, wore luxury clothes, and had doormen in their buildings. On the other side, there was the vibrant but more modest world of Brooklyn, where grit mixed with an electric energy, and the lines between acceptance and prejudice could be razor thin. He had to navigate the challenges of being biracial in America at a time when race relations were in constant flux. Strangers sometimes hurled cruel remarks his way. Even in progressive circles, ignorance and prejudice were not absent. At school, Lenny often felt like an outsider because he never fully fit into any single racial or cultural category. Nonetheless, he absorbed lessons from each environment he inhabited. Manhattan gave him a sense of sophistication, an exposure to wealth and refined artistic culture, while Brooklyn honed his street smarts and imparted in him a raw sense of honesty that would eventually shape his music. The complexity of this upbringing appears in many of his songs and in the way he has approached life. In his 2020 memoir, Let Love Rule, Lenny described himself as living between extremes: black and white, Jewish and Christian, Manhattan and Brooklyn. Yet rather than allowing those extremes to tear him apart, he found inspiration in them, learning that he could be versatile and flexible. He once said, "I'm comfortable living in a car or a box or a tent or a trailer, and I'm comfortable living in a mansion." This statement foreshadows the adaptability that would serve him well in a notoriously fickle music industry. From a very young age, Lenny displayed an appetite for rhythm and melody that transcended typical childhood interests. He showed an almost preternatural ability to turn random household items, pots, pans, and even cutlery, into makeshift instruments. His mother, in her gentle, encouraging way, made sure to support these early inklings of musical talent, while his father monitored things from a stricter viewpoint. Every day, the young boy essentially lived in two worlds, one that indulged his musical passions and one that demanded a certain polish and discipline. Although his parents' personal relationship was fraught with difficulties, particularly tied to his father's extramarital affairs, Lenny nonetheless gleaned from them a kind of blueprint for life. From Roxy, he learned kindness and an unshakable sense of self-worth. From Cy, he inherited a sense of determination and a respect for rules. Together, those influences formed the basis of his unique personality, which was, even early on, a blending of softness and resolve. In many ways, Lenny Kravitz's childhood is a testament to how varied influences, from heritage to environment, can converge and spark creativity. The raw edges of his life, shaped by the unvarnished realities of race and family conflict, molded him into an artist who could authentically grapple with such topics in his music. This mixture of love, tension, heritage, and environment was fertile ground for a young man about to dive into the world of professional music. As we transition to the next portion of Kravitz's story, it becomes clear that even with a high-profile family, he could not simply waltz into stardom. Instead, he had to fight to prove himself, endure poverty, and maintain faith in his talents despite the odds. Music came naturally to Lenny Kravitz. Since toddlerhood, he had been enthralled by the power of sound. The simple act of banging metal lids or wooden spoons on kitchen counters lit a spark in him that would never die. But it wasn't just idle child's play. He exhibited an uncanny sense of rhythm and pitch. By the time he was a young boy, he was singing in the California Boys Choir, which introduced him to a structured form of musical training and performance. This disciplined environment nurtured his raw talent and gave him a sense of what it meant to work in harmony with others, adapt to formal expectations, and truly refine his voice. At home, Roxy Roker recognized Lenny's musical gifts and was supportive, despite the challenges her family faced. She found ways to encourage her son's creative instincts, whether by enrolling him in music programs or simply ensuring he had access to instruments. Her star power in Hollywood, particularly through her role on The Jeffersons, might have suggested to outsiders that Lenny's path would be smooth. But the truth was that at Beverly Hills High School, where he found himself after the family relocated to accommodate Roxy's acting work, he encountered a multi-tiered social environment that wasn't always welcoming. Beverly Hills High was known for its robust performing arts program, which included everything from musicals to advanced vocal classes. This environment was a crucible for a teenager who already knew deep down that he wanted a life filled with music. He immersed himself in whatever musical avenues were available: choir practice, band rehearsals, informal jam sessions with classmates. He would pick up any instrument he could get his hands on, drums, guitar, piano, and experiment with different sounds until he felt confident enough to show others what he could do. By the time he was on the cusp of adulthood, Lenny had already begun harboring aspirations of carving out a serious career in music. Yet, he didn't want to rely on his mother's or father's industry connections. Perhaps it was pride, perhaps it was the need for independence, or perhaps he feared being labeled as a nepotism case. Regardless, Lenny felt compelled to walk his own path, a sentiment that became more urgent as tensions within his family life escalated. According to him, his father had a history of infidelities that cast a long shadow over the household. The strife reached a breaking point when Lenny was barely out of his teenage years, and news of his parents' impending divorce left him emotionally unmoored. Instead of crumbling under the emotional burden, he decided to strike out on his own. In a dramatic step, he left home, severing himself from the financial safety net his parents provided. What followed was a period of genuine hardship, a time when Lenny Kravitz, no matter how talented, had to learn the ropes of the real world. He rented a shabby car that cost him $5 a day in fees. This vehicle wasn't just his mode of transportation, it was his makeshift home. He slept in that car, often parking it outside his girlfriend's place at night, trying to stay warm and figure out his next move. The car's narrow seats became his bed, its cramped interior his living room. And even that arrangement fell apart at times, such as when a fight led him to slam the door so hard that he broke the window, leaving him exposed to the elements. During this period, Lenny did whatever it took to survive. He took odd jobs in fish markets, shoe shops, and even participated in small-time recording gigs, if they were available, just so he could get by. The fruitlessness of repeated auditions and the skepticism of music label executives frustrated him. The 1980s music scene was filled with neon synth pop, hair metal, and a general preference for polished, marketable stars. Lenny's look and sound, raw, vintage, deeply spiritual, and an eclectic fusion of rock, funk, soul, and R&B, didn't neatly align with any of these trends. He was searching for a label that would accept his wide-ranging influences rather than trying to compress him into a radio-friendly mold. But if there's one thing that carried him through, it was his unwavering belief in his music. He developed a daily routine that kept him grounded. He would often look for small studios where he could experiment, layering guitar riffs over funky bass lines, recording ephemeral ideas for songs, sometimes even sleeping amid amplifiers and tangle cords because he had nowhere else to go. This period in his life is where he began to crystallize his unique musical identity. He refused to follow the standard formula. Instead, he let his natural instincts shape songs that felt both retro and modern, honoring the legacy of classic rock, soul, and funk, while injecting a fiercely contemporary energy. The tension between wanting mainstream recognition and staying true to his artistic voice defined these early years. He was aware that he looked different and sounded different, yet that difference was precisely what gave him an edge, a sense of authenticity that would eventually attract an audience hungry for something real. It was a time of extremes, intense financial struggles, and incredible creative flourishing. He was, in essence, living the raw, unfiltered experience of the starving artist, forging a style that would soon catch the attention of the music world. As we move forward, we see how these early experiences, particularly the time spent in that battered rental car and the leaps of faith he took, laid the groundwork for major breakthroughs. From forging an unexpected partnership with one of pop music's biggest superstars to encountering Bob Dylan on stage, Lenny's story began to intertwine with some of the most iconic names in the business. By the mid to late 1980s, Lenny Kravitz was still hustling. Hollywood connections notwithstanding, he found that forging a serious music career demanded relentless hustle and a willingness to endure repeated rejections. Music executives regularly dismissed him. They saw a man who looked like he had stepped out of a 1970s time warp, whose musical influences range from Jimi Hendrix to the Beatles to soul legends like Marvin Gaye. In an era that favored synthesizers and glossy production, Kravitz's analog-oriented style was a question mark for label scouts who couldn't figure out how to package him. But fate, or perhaps persistence, eventually led him to Virgin Records. He was introduced to an A&R representative who was less concerned with immediate market trends and more intrigued by raw talent. The rep listened to early demos of what would become Kravitz's debut album and heard something special in the melodic lines and heartfelt lyrics. Virgin offered him a deal, understanding that he wasn't going to be an overnight commercial smash, but firmly believing in his potential to carve a meaningful niche. Around the same time, ironically, other labels that had previously overlooked him started to come forward with offers. They only took him seriously after they realized he might sign with Virgin. Lenny, however, decided to stick with the label that believed in him from the start. He knew he needed a place that would allow him to be himself, to develop at his own pace. This sense of loyalty and authenticity would become a hallmark of his career and personal life, reinforcing his reputation as an artist driven by passion rather than pure commercial ambition. In 1989, he released Let Love Rule, his first album. The record was, in many ways, an extension of his bohemian life with then-partner Lisa Bonet, whom he had married in 1987. Let Love Rule combined elements of funk, soul, and rock, seamlessly weaving in messages of unity and spirituality. Critics were divided. Some found his retro style refreshing in an era of digitized sound, while others thought he wasn't innovative enough to stand out. Commercially, the album didn't become a runaway success, but it performed decently, introducing him to a modest but passionate fan base. Kravitz knew he needed a bigger push, and that push arrived in a most unexpected way, through collaboration with Madonna. In 1990, he co-wrote and co-produced Justify My Love, the lead single off her greatest hits compilation, The Immaculate Collection. The track featured a sultry, groundbreaking style that was scandalous at the time, due to its suggestive lyrics and a music video that was banned by MTV. Despite, or perhaps because of, this controversy, the song soared to the top of the charts. Suddenly, everyone in the industry wanted to know who Lenny Kravitz was, and whether he was just a behind-the-scenes songwriter or a talent in his own right. This moment was crucial. Not only did it lend credibility to Lenny as a producer and songwriter, but it also gave him the confidence to expand his own repertoire. He seized the opportunity to open for established acts like Tom Petty, David Bowie, and Bob Dylan, each of whom represented a different facet of rock music's past and present. Sharing the stage with these legends conferred a legitimacy on him that no record label marketing campaign could replicate. Yet, even within these successes, there were moments that reminded him how new he still was to high-profile stardom. One night, Dylan invited him to perform Maggie's Farm live. Starstruck and unprepared, Lenny forgot the lyrics on stage. It could have been an embarrassing setback, but he later recalled the incident with humility and even humor. The surreal experience of singing alongside one of his idols, only to flub the words, underscored the fact that he was still learning and growing as a performer. This period also illustrated a shift in his worldview. No longer was he that insecure young man struggling to pay his rental car fee. Now he was rubbing elbows with music icons, receiving calls from major pop stars, and building a name that fans began to associate with classic rock meets modern edge. And yet financially, he was still finding his footing. While the collaboration with Madonna and the tours with rock legends boosted his visibility, he was not immediately rolling in wealth. He was in the process of transitioning from an underground musician to a mainstream presence, all while grappling with the emotional complexities of marriage and fatherhood. Indeed, fatherhood came into play in 1988 when Lisa Bonet gave birth to their daughter, Zoe Kravitz. Managing a budding music career while raising a child in a relatively bohemian environment demanded flexibility. Their home in New York felt, as Lenny described it, grungy. Artists were squatting in empty buildings, crime and petty theft were common, and the two parents were doing the best they could on a shoestring budget. These conditions, while far from glamorous, nurtured creativity in an almost paradoxical way. Lenny found inspiration in minimalism. Music remained at the core of his existence, acting as both livelihood and spiritual release. One day he scribbled the words "Let Love Rule" on a wall and decided they would be the driving theme of his album. That phrase represented an ethos he aimed to embody. Critics might have labeled it idealistic or simplistic, but for Lenny, it was a sincere declaration of how he wanted to approach life and relationships. That same sincerity began to seep into all aspects of his craft, from lyrical composition to performance style. By the early 1990s, Lenny Kravitz was no longer just an underdog. He was a bona fide presence in rock and pop. Still, just as he was finding his footing, life had another curveball waiting for him. This time, it would be heartbreak on a level he had never known, and it would push him to create one of the most emotionally searing works of his career. Marriage to Lisa Bonet was supposed to be a fairy tale. They were seen as the epitome of cool. She, a star from The Cosby Show, and he, a rising rock singer, both physically striking, effortlessly stylish, and deeply in love. Their daughter Zoe only cemented the sense that they were living in their own bohemian paradise, far from the superficialities of Hollywood. Yet behind closed doors, their relationship was beginning to fracture. Both were strong, creative personalities. In the intense environment of early parenthood, financial pressures, and the demands of the entertainment business, tensions rose. Eventually, the couple decided to separate. This was devastating to Lenny. They had been each other's confidants, mirrors, and muses. He had composed music for her, about her, with her. Their separation felt, in his words, like the splitting of a single soul into two. Unable to sleep and haunted by his own sorrow, Lenny channeled his grief into his second album, Mama Said. Released in 1991, this record was drenched in vulnerability, heartbreak, and a longing for reconciliation. The track It Ain't Over Till It's Over, one of his most enduring hits, was a direct expression of what he hoped, that perhaps his marriage could be salvaged. In a later interview with Rolling Stone, he explained that he wrote the song for Lisa, capturing the emotional turbulence they both experienced. We were going through our break-off, which led to a divorce. We had our child and a great life together. We blended together so well, so it was a very difficult time. Critics praised the album for its candor and its seamless fusion of funk, soul, and rock. Fans resonated deeply with the songs, drawn in by the naked honesty of his lyrics. Commercially, it marked a significant leap forward for Lenny, who was beginning to stand on firmer ground in the music world. Indeed, Heartbreak had an unexpected silver lining. It solidified his reputation as a songwriter who could capture the rawest of human emotions and transform them into accessible, yet deeply personal, rock anthems. Despite the pain, Lenny and Lisa would eventually rebuild a friendship. Over time, they learned to love each other in new ways, focusing primarily on co-parenting Zoe. In a story that garnered media attention, Lenny even developed a friendship with Lisa's second husband, actor Jason Momoa. For many, this represented a surprisingly wholesome dynamic in an industry more known for acrimonious divorces. Perhaps the open-mindedness that undergirded Lenny and Lisa's earlier bond persisted, now repurposed to maintain stability and affection for Zoe. For his part, Lenny took fatherhood very seriously. His daughter remained a central figure in his life, and as the years passed, Zoe herself inherited her parents' artistic inclinations, venturing into both acting and music. Most famously, she would go on to portray Catwoman in The Batman, a role that gave Lenny bragging rights as the father of a DC superhero. But paternal pride took root long before she achieved that iconic status. In fact, one of Lenny's most heartfelt musical offerings is Flowers for Zoe, a lullaby-like track in which he expresses his devotion to his daughter. He wrote it when she was still a child, capturing that sense of wonder parents feel when they look at their offspring and see infinite possibility. In an interview with Rolling Stone, he admitted that the song was a direct outpouring of his paternal love, an ode to the purity and innocence he wanted to protect in her. He has also remarked multiple times on how he wishes his mother, Roxy Roker, could have seen Zoe grow up. Roxy passed away in 1995, before Zoe entered her teenage years, and well before she became an actor in her own right. Lenny regrets that his mother, whom he greatly admired, could not witness her granddaughter's evolution into a strong, charismatic, and talented young woman. This sense of loss is part of the emotional undercurrent that continues to fuel his music and spiritual exploration. Moving beyond heartbreak and forging a unified family dynamic with his ex-wife's husband and daughter was not an easy feat. Yet it stands as another testament to Lenny's resilience. In a world that often prizes dramatic feuds and sensational headlines, he chose understanding and friendship. This capacity for maintaining compassion in the face of personal trials would also reflect in his increasingly spiritual musical explorations, as well as in his approach to mental health. Next, we'll delve into his faith, a core pillar that has quietly guided many of his decisions. From a child plagued by strange nightmares to an adult who melds Christian beliefs with an openness to other forms of worship, Lenny's religious journey provides a deeper lens through which to view his artistry and personal growth. Spirituality has never been a peripheral issue for Lenny Kravitz. It has been a driving force, shaping his perspective on everything from relationships to performance. He has often described how, at around 5 years old, he began experiencing recurring nightmares, vivid, unsettling dreams that haunted him night after night. Even at that tender age, he found himself questioning mortality and the concept of eternal life. How could something as animate and present as a person simply cease to exist? Those questions led him to an early curiosity about God and the afterlife. When he was 13, he encountered a friend whose father was a minister. This friend spoke to him about Jesus Christ, salvation, and the nature of God's love. Lenny recalls feeling a profound sense of recognition during that conversation, as though the missing puzzle piece had been found. This wasn't a mere intellectual revelation. It was an emotional and spiritual awakening. Yet, in typical Kravitz fashion, he refused to confine himself to a strict religious routine. He once told Rolling Stone that while he believes passionately in Christ and the teachings of Christianity, he does not subscribe to organized religion in a traditional sense. He doesn't attend church regularly, nor does he follow a defined congregation. For him, faith is intensely personal, something nurtured through prayer, meditation, and artistic expression, rather than through institutional ritual. His songs frequently reflect these spiritual undercurrents. Tracks like Believe and Calling All Angels carry strong messages of hope, redemption, and divine presence. In interviews, he has noted that music and faith are intertwined, with each feeding the other. When he hits a creative block, he prays. When he experiences a spiritual revelation, it becomes the seed of a new melody or lyric. This cycle gives his work a sincerity and emotional heft that resonate with listeners from a wide range of backgrounds. Additionally, one can't overlook the importance of his cultural and familial roots in shaping his spirituality. He was raised in an environment where he absorbed Jewish traditions and observed Christian practices. This dual upbringing gave him a broader perspective on spirituality. He once said, "I am deeply two-sided, black and white, Jewish and Christian, Manhattan and Brooklynite, emphasizing that he sees value in drawing from multiple spiritual well springs. Not everyone in his circle understood or supported this open-ended approach. Even fans sometimes found it puzzling. How could a rock star, known for edgy performances and a bohemian lifestyle, also speak so earnestly about Jesus and God? But that tension never deterred him. Instead, he seemed to relish the freedom that came with charting his own faith journey, following neither mainstream religious practice nor wholly secular philosophies. In many interviews, Kravitz has insisted that one does not need a formal sanctuary to commune with God. Nature, music, or a simple quiet room can become a sacred space. This viewpoint was influenced not only by his Christian beliefs, but also by the various cultures and spiritual practices he encountered while traveling the world for tours and personal explorations. He might admire Buddhist practices, appreciate the rituals of Judaism, or feel uplifted by a gospel choir in a Southern Baptist church, all without feeling the need to fully convert to or reject any single tradition. Ultimately, his spirituality is intimately tied to his sense of compassion. When asked about how faith impacts his personal relationships, he has mentioned that it encourages forgiveness, empathy, and kindness. This was especially tested during his parents' separation, as well as his own divorce from Lisa Bonet. Holding on to bitterness or resentment felt incompatible with his spiritual aspirations. Instead, he chose to strive for understanding, to see the divine spark in others, even if they had hurt him. As we'll see in the forthcoming sections, his spiritual foundation also played a major role in how he coped with mental health struggles. Music, prayer, and introspection became tools for navigating bouts of depression, moments of artistic stagnation, and the pressures of fame. Even as his music career ascended, Lenny Kravitz discovered another avenue of artistic expression: acting. It might have seemed like a natural progression for someone whose mother was a famous actress, but Lenny took his time before stepping in front of the camera. He later admitted that he had been offered many roles in the past but found them cliché or uninspiring. He didn't want to act merely for the sake of acting or for a quick paycheck. That changed in 2009 when he took a small but significant role in the film Precious. Directed by Lee Daniels and based on the novel Push by Sapphire, the movie told a gritty, heartbreaking story of abuse, poverty, and resilience in Harlem. Kravitz portrayed a nurse who offers compassion and support to the film's titular character. Despite limited screen time, he delivered a performance brimming with empathy and subtlety, earning positive reviews and sparking a wave of curiosity about his potential in cinema. Encouraged by the experience, Lenny proceeded to explore other roles. In 2012, he appeared in The Hunger Games as Cinna, a soft-spoken, innovative stylist who becomes an ally to Katniss Everdeen, the film's protagonist. Though it was a supporting role, his portrayal had emotional depth that stood out in a film filled with intense action and drama. He also joined the star-studded cast of The Butler in 2013, further proving that his acting chops were no fluke. In interviews, Lenny has distinguished his music from his acting endeavors. Music, he insists, is an intensely personal pursuit, an avenue for self-expression, where every lyric and chord progression is a piece of his own soul. Acting, however, offers him a respite from that inward focus. On set, he is part of a larger narrative, shaping a character who might be vastly different from himself. Rather than projecting his own emotions, he channels the hopes, fears, and motivations of someone else, a process he has described as refreshing and liberating. He also recognized that acting challenged him in ways music did not. Standing on stage with a guitar in hand, he was in control. On a film set, he was one member of a huge collaborative team that included directors, fellow actors, cinematographers, editors, and more. Learning to trust that team and to serve the story above his own ego required an adjustment. Yet the result was profoundly rewarding, offering him a sense of camaraderie reminiscent of what he'd felt back in his California Boys Choir days, when group harmony mattered more than individual shine. His mother's legacy is perhaps another subtle thread that runs through his acting journey. Roxy Roker was best known for her groundbreaking role as one half of one of television's first interracial couples on The Jeffersons, a significant cultural milestone that challenged racial prejudices on American TV. In picking roles that often require emotional authenticity and nuance, Lenny seems to honor the integrity and impact his mother displayed in her own acting career. In the broader scheme of his life, acting has become a complementary outlet, allowing him to explore stories and emotions beyond the realm of his personal experience. It also broadened his fan base. People who might not have listened to his music discovered him through his on-screen roles, realizing that behind the flamboyant rocker persona was a multifaceted artist capable of shifting seamlessly between mediums. Still, music remains his first love. Between film projects, he consistently returns to the studio, to the electric thrill of live performance, and to the introspective process of songwriting. Acting, in many respects, has deepened his music, giving him fresh perspectives and the chance to inhabit different viewpoints and lives, even if only for the duration of a film shoot. As we shift our focus to another dimension of Lenny's life, his struggles with mental health, we see that both music and acting played crucial roles in how he coped. Artistic expression in all its forms became his lifeline, a channel through which he found meaning, release, and ultimately renewal. Fame, creativity, and personal trauma can be a volatile mix, and Lenny Kravitz has experienced the highs and lows of all three. Despite the outward glamour, platinum records, sold-out tours, movie roles, and a star-studded social circle, he has openly admitted that he has grappled with depression. The roots of his struggle are multifaceted. On one level, he inherited a contemplative nature that compels him to question life's meaning and to wrestle with existential issues. On another, his parents' troubled relationship and his own painful divorce left deep emotional imprints. In interviews with major outlets like Today, Lenny has emphasized that wealth and fame do not inoculate anyone against mental health issues. The cycle of releasing new music, touring, promoting his brand, and constantly being under the glare of media scrutiny can chip away at self-esteem and stability. Moreover, his perfectionist tendencies often made him his own harshest critic. Standing outside himself, he would analyze every performance, every note, every public statement, and demand an ever higher standard of himself. This self-imposed pressure occasionally led to dark moods, where he felt unworthy or anxious about the next creative step. On tour, the frenetic schedule and lack of privacy sometimes exacerbated his stress. He admits to having moments when he doubted his abilities, questioned whether the industry truly understood him, and worried about letting fans down. One of the albums that reflects these emotional peaks and valleys is Baptism, where he explored themes of rebirth, faith, and self-forgiveness. The record's lyrics paint a portrait of an artist wrestling with self-doubt and yearning for spiritual cleansing. The very title, Baptism, implies a desire to wash away old baggage and emerge renewed. In interviews, he revealed that writing and recording these tracks allowed him to pour his anxieties and frustrations into his art. After finishing the album, he felt a sense of catharsis, like he had confronted and purged many of his inner demons. Music has always been the main channel through which Lenny processes his emotional life, but he also underscores the importance of other coping mechanisms, such as prayer, meditation, and trusted relationships. His spiritual convictions, far from being a mere footnote in his story, act as an anchor when life's storms threaten to overwhelm him. He often refers to gratitude, taking stock of what he does have, rather than fixating on what he lacks. This practice has helped him maintain perspective during tumultuous times. Additionally, he has learned the value of professional help, counseling, and open conversation. He believes that too many people, especially men, view seeking help as a sign of weakness. While he hasn't always shared details about any therapy sessions or other interventions, he is vocally supportive of mental health awareness and encourages fans to be honest about their struggles, to reach out for help, and to understand that depression can affect anyone, regardless of social status or material wealth. He also acknowledges that part of his growth involved forgiving his father. While their relationship had its share of resentments, particularly due to his father's tendency to cheat, Lenny recognized that holding on to anger was detrimental to his own well-being. Through prayer, music, and introspection, he found a place of empathy. Even though they might never have been best friends, he wanted to honor the good qualities his father did impart: discipline, a strong work ethic, and the determination that helped shape Lenny's success. Over time, Lenny Kravitz's personal growth has become as integral to his public persona as his flamboyant fashion sense or his rock star swagger. He talks openly about second chances, about how love and spirituality can transform emotional wounds into sources of strength. Moreover, he uses his social platforms and interviews to encourage young musicians, actors, or anyone struggling with similar issues, reminding them that adversity can fuel creativity if channeled constructively. His transparency about mental health also pushes against the stereotype that rock stars must constantly maintain a cool facade. He doesn't shy away from discussing vulnerability, heartbreak, or the crippling sense of isolation that can arise even when fans are chanting your name in a packed arena. In this sense, Lenny's journey is a testament to how personal adversity can be transformed into art that resonates on a universal level. As we come to the final leg of this exploration, we'll see that Lenny Kravitz's life story is far from a simple narrative of struggle and triumph. It's a tapestry woven from multiple threads: cultural identity, musical innovation, spiritual seeking, familial ties, romantic heartbreak, mental health, and creative fulfillment. Each thread influences the others, forming a complex, ever-evolving portrait of an artist who continues to let love rule, both on stage and off. That's the content of today's video. If you enjoy the video, give us a like, comment, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to receive more of our new videos. Thanks for watching.